when I was a kid, on Friday nights or Saturday nights, we used to go as a family to a restaurant in Central Square in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Uh, I think it was usually Friday nights that we went because on Saturday nights, often my parents would go off on their own and we'd get a babysitter or my grandparents would come to stay with us. But Simeone's was one of the highlights of my week, or even, I mean, almost even the year for when I was a kid. We would pile into the car, and usually to my dad. My dad had a Ford Falcon station wagon that was midnight blue, and me and my two sisters would pile into the back seat. My dad and mom would be in the front, and we'd drive down to Simeone's and park. And it had, I remember it had in the front of the restaurant. You'd go in. It was a Simeone's Italian American restaurant, and you go in and there'd be these red vinyl booths with the little jukebox selector things over each table. And then you could go farther back, and they had a real dining room. There were tables and stuff. Sometimes we'd get a booth, and sometimes we'd sit at a table. And they knew my dad. My dad could not cook at all. Well, that's not true. He had two things he could do. He could boil an egg, and he could make a pretty mean tuna fish salad sandwich. That was about it. Couldn't do anything else. So when my dad was in medical school, he learned where all the good eateries were in Boston, greater Boston area, and Simeone's had become one of them. So Simeone's helped feed my father during medical school, and then after he got married, he took us to all the places he used to go as a med student that basically kept him alive before he and my mother got married. So he had been going to these places. Let's see, my dad started med school, I think, in 59 or 58 or 60. And by the time I was born, he was an intern. But on Friday nights, when I was alive and a child, my sisters and my parents would go to Simeone's. And there we'd sit in the booth, and my folks would order Coca-Colas for us kids, and they would come in these tumblers with full of ice, and my folks would say to us, "Don't drink them all before you get your pizza. Don't drink them all before you get your pizza," and we almost always would. We would almost just pile them down, and this was before everybody fully appreciated the evils of sugar and caffeine. Well, caffeine, man, on kids. But we would get all hyper. I can remember not being able to sit still in those booths or even at the table. Small wonder now why. And you always wanted to. We tried to save our Coca-Colas, our Cokes, because the water was basically just tap water on ice, and it was so chlorinated that you felt like you were drinking pool water, out of a swimming pool. And so we'd wait, and my folks would always order pizza for us. And part of the reason my folks liked Simeone's, they did everything well, but their pizza was exquisite. And I've spent the better part of the last 15 years trying to come somewhere close to recreating it. Fortunately, there's a pizza shop or two in Rochester that are somewhat close, but nobody hits all the notes right. Simeone's was a big pie. It was a good 20. Yeah, it was a good 24-inch pie, 22, 24 inches, and it had a very, very thin crust with a little bit of cornmeal on the bottom to give it that crunch. It was cooked in a very, very hot oven, very hot. So it would might get a little bit scorched on the bottom, which is what you like, and sometimes the crust would have a little bit of scorch. They used they'd use a good amount of baking powder in the crust. As you can tell, maybe I've researched this a lot. I've done a lot of experimentation. I've made hundreds of pies trying to recreate what they did. They had a ton of oregano in their sauce, which I love, and then the cheese on top, and they had a fair amount of sauce. The cheese on top was a mixture, as far as I can tell, not just of mozzarella, but a mixture of Parmesan and mozzarella and maybe something else. I'm not sure what the other thing is, if there's something else there. But it was very, very thin crust, even, and they would occasionally get these bubbles that would separate, that would blow up, usually around the crust, but also they'd get them in the middle occasionally, and those oh, so delish. So we would gorge on pizza, my sisters and I. My dad would order chicken cacciatore usually, and my mother would get veal sometimes, or she would share, or she would share with us a little bit. And my father worked so hard and such long hours and was so stressed. When we went out as a family and did this, it was like a bubble bursting. It was like, oh, we all would just go, wow, this is so wonderful. And my sisters and I, we would chow down on that pizza, and the waiters, they all had black tuxedo jackets, and they always had I remember they had the white towels draped over their arm, and they were as Italian as the day is long. And the dining room, or just describe the front room, the dining room had had this mural of Venice and other scenes from Italy. I remember there was a Leaning Tower of Pisa was there, and Simeone's had a red, dark red, kind of blood red carpet there, and we just loved it, absolutely loved it. About 5 years ago, I did a Google search on Simeone's. Simeone's, after my father died in 1974, about 6 months later, Simeone's, was it 6 months later? I can't remember. It might have actually been during the 6 months that he was sick. But sometime between then, sometime around late 74, 75, or in 74, 75, Simeone's burned to the ground. And it was very sad for all of us. We really missed it. And we knew that that was a big loss for us. And but we would finish eating our pizza, the kids and I, and we would be stuffed, absolutely stuffed. And my dad would always compliment them on their food, and we'd go to pay the check, and they had the little glass bowl full of the little after dinner mints, and you take a little spoon and you take a little mint, or sometimes they'd have peppermint candy, or I can remember maybe once they had butterscotch there too. And we'd have a little candy with us as we were going, or sometimes Andy's mints. Wow, it's just all these details are coming back to me. Sometimes I had Andy's mints. That was really special. And Dad would pay the check and leave a tip, and we'd pile back into the car and head home. And I'm sure after that it was bedtime. So that was Simeone's, and I still to this day miss it very much, and I'm still on a quest to make the perfect Simeone style pizza. Although, well, we've come pretty close in some ways. So, and that's it for Simeone's.